Welcome, everyone, to the Global HSP Summit. I am your host, Jill Marie Haas. And today I have with me the incredible Lisa Parks. She's not only an intuitive coach, healer, and writer, but also a champion for wild hearts who want to embrace their sensitive nature without the burden of self-doubt and anxiety. With a deep passion for helping others, Lisa has been coaching children since 2010, and her journey has since transformed into a powerful catalyst for her own healing. And now she focuses on empowering women to connect with their playful spirits, unleash their creativity, and find inner peace as they break free from generational patterns of conditioning. Get ready to be uplifted by Lisa's wisdom and insights. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi Jill, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm so great, and I'm so glad you're here. This is going to be a lot of fun.
I'm really grateful to be here. It's lovely to meet you.
Aw, thanks. So today we're going to talk about becoming the author of your HSP life. But before we go deeper into that, I want to know a little bit more about you and how you learned or when that you are an HSP yourself, highly sensitive person, and how you got yourself to this point from that.
Okay, cool. I didn't know I was an HSP, but until my therapist suggested that I read Judith Orloff's book, The Empath Survival Guide. And then that brought me to Elaine, Aaron, and those kind of people. I had absolutely no idea. And at that point, I'd been in therapy for about, I don't know, more than 10 years. And we've been working through quite a lot of childhood trauma. But actually, as I look back, I can just see things about my childhood where, well, for example, I hated the dark. I was terrified of the dark because I could feel things in the dark. And I used to see this man in our house on my periphery vision. Now, some people would say that's just a manifestation of all the unhealed trauma and the fear in your house. And some people would call that spirit. So, whatever you want to call it. I was also the emotional shock absorber in my family. So I felt stuff that was unspoken and unfelt by any family member, but mostly between my parents because I was the eldest. And I had a rich inner world and I loved reading and I was very creative, but I didn't have anyone in my immediate family to draw that out of me. And I ended up going to a really academic school um, where creativity wasn't a thing. And so I felt like I was failing because that wasn't my, I love learning, but I'm an experiential learner and I hated the structure of school. And it's funny because when I was coaching kids, I coached kids from my old school. And obviously they were wild hearts or HSPs or, whatever, empaths, whatever you call us. And they were experiencing the same feeling like they don't fit in, feeling like no one gets them, feeling like they were failing all the time. So yeah, but it was nice to recognize that I was an HSP, but I think it took a long time to kind of integrate that identity or acknowledge that about myself um because of my traumatic background, it was always work around that. And obviously the underlying message with that is, oh, there must be something wrong with me. There must be something wrong with me. But actually, I suppose that kind of helped me make sense of it a bit more.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you have this background, and now here you are coaching others. Like, what really brought you into the world of like coaching children when you started with that?
So I think I was trying to find my inner child, but I didn't know that until, like 10 years down the line. And I was kind of learning from my therapist on the job. So I was having regular therapy, but then I was kind of going off and doing my own thing. And if anyone wants to listen to my podcast, it's called the Wildheart Diaries. It's my adventures in healing. I've done everything from like equine assisted therapy to kinesiology to Reiki. Like I've just done all the things because I was just desperate to try and feel at peace in my own body. And I remember it was just by coincidence, or not as the case may be, where a lady just said, "Oh, my son, I think he's sensitive and he's struggling with this." And I used to go to kids' houses in my little secondhand Volkswagen Polo, and just sit with them and just listen. And then hearing all their stories, they were like little mirrors showing me parts of myself that I'd never met. And then even then, working with um, all these kids who had learning difficulties or were being labelled with ADHD or sensory processing disorder, I still didn't make the connection that I was one of them. It's like just not, there's a real identity crisis, I think, of like, if you've been invalidated a lot, or your family don't understand high sensitivity, or your family emotionally cut off, there's this big kind of struggle to work out who you are. And because you're an HSP and you naturally absorb what your environment is, you become what your environment wants you to be. And then it's like, well, where's your sense of self then in all of that? You know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So do you feel like you've found your sense of self now?
Absolutely. And I'm really quite proud to be an HSP. And I feel the world needs more HSPs in terms of like bring back creativity, bring it back into schools, bring
Mm.
creativity and like heart-led leadership. Well, my God, do we need leaders like that right now? Don't we, in the world?
Yes, yes, agreed. Yeah, and with the HSPs, they make up about 20-ish% of the world's population. So that's a lot, really, if you look at it, like in your neighborhood,
Mm.
even like 20% of your neighborhood is probably an HSP. And with that said, like you said, we can be absorbing our environment, and then we tend to want, everybody wants to belong. It's one of those basic human drivers of is belonging. So then when we see the 80% doing things a certain way, we do start to question ourselves, don't we? Like something's wrong with me. How come I don't like that? And then 80, all these people like that. I don't like that. Why don't I like that? What's wrong with me? Or how come I'm not like that? Or how come I do these things and they don't? So yeah, I can see where there's like a complete it's a struggle to then kind of shift it around and start taking ownership. So I mean of being an HSP. So how would you say that you did that for yourself? Like maybe there was a struggle and you learned that you were an HSP. Did you like wrap your arms around it right away and be like, yes, this is me. I'm totally going down this road? Or did you find that you had to do some unwinding?
No, I had to really untangle it because I suppose the part of me that was abused believed that I was inherently bad. And so and I was like the emotional trash can, if you like, the scapegoat basically in the family system. So by relinquishing myself of that scapegoat role, and saying I'm an HSP, then that kind of made me right. And that was a
Mm.
really funny place to be because I was so used to being wrong all the time and having to defend myself and fight for my voice to be. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, so then it's like a scary place to own something that you've never had to own, or who's gonna even let you own it? What are they gonna say about me if I own it, right? Even if
Right.
it's within and you don't even voice it out loud.
Yeah. But, and it's taken me quite a long time to kind of uh, untie and release myself from those shackles. And even when you're released from it, and it's a weird thing to explain, but you know, like how you see those elephants at the circus and they've always been chained up, always been chained up, and then someone sets them free and they don't wander. And for ages, I kind of, there was a part in my healing where I just stayed stuck because I was like, oh, I could just take a step forward. And then that felt really terrifying, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you say that you're taking steps now?
Oh my God, absolutely. I'm fully embracing it. I'm fully embracing it and really excited. And I have to thank the kids for that mostly because all of the time I'm listening to their struggles and, you know, what they're having to endure at school and why they have to be labeled to get the support they need, and being that kind of good enough, compassionate, empathic parent or empathetic parent, then I'm learned to give that to myself. So it was through healing, to meeting my inner child and healing the inner child that it happened, but it didn't happen overnight. It's a slow process, healing, isn't it? It's slow if it's going to
Mhm.
be lasting. And yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious now. So you transitioned from working with children to adults, and what
Yeah,
brought that on?
because we've all got a 9-year old inside of us that needs to be seen and heard. And from working with the families, I mean, unfortunately, I did work with lots of families who weren't open to healing, obviously, because they were sending their kids to me. So they weren't making the connection that the environment for the child and the way they were being parented in the attachment style and all those things were relevant. And, you know, you can educate people to a point, but then, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And I became increasingly frustrated. And I remember saying to my supervisor, like, I feel like I could do more with these kids. And it's frustrating me because they're coming to me, they're healing, they're getting into a good place. And then I'm sending them back home again. And they're going back into the energy that they're being raised in. And that's not changing. And so then 6 months later, they're going to be coming back to see me again.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wanted to leave them with the little nugget of, I see you and it's not you. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted, without making their parents wrong, because obviously that wouldn't be safe for them, but I wanted to leave them with a way of letting them know that that was the truth. And then, yeah, so then I just thought, I've got to heal, I've got to work with adults, I've got to work with the inner children of adults and start from the ground upwards, or I've got to go into schools. And because I hated school so much, I just thought, oh, that doesn't really feel in alignment with who I am, to go into the school system and try and change that.
Yeah, that's
No.
a big animal to work on by yourself.
Right.
But I totally feel you in that desire, because I think a lot of us who are HSPs and we are trying to make that impact, or we have a calling, we feel like we have this calling to make a difference in the world. And so we're going to the immediate place that's in front of us. So for you, it was children in schools, and you could see, like, I think HSPs are really good at looking, and not looking for problems, but we identify where an upgrade could take place. I don't want to call it a problem, right? But we can see like, ooh, I can see an improvement here and here, and wow, wouldn't it be great if, and and so I give you kudos for attempting all of that and wanting to dive into it. So now you're working with adults. Oh, go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, I was going to say, it isn't that hard, maybe, to people like us who can go, well, it's this, and this. And ultimately, the biggest thing I see children struggling with in the classroom is that they're still being ruled by fear and they don't feel safe enough to learn. And that is a basic requirement for their nervous system before they can bring themselves to learning. And I'm like, why don't more people know about this?
It
But
does seem
but
kind of
it sounds
basic.
it sounds basic, but then you just see how the world is and the awareness, and like, and I'm not saying that to say we're better than other people. I'm saying
Right.
it seems easy, but obviously it isn't, because if it was that easy, then surely someone would have done it by now.
Exactly, exactly. No, it does seem like it. Yeah, it seems basic, right? But it's not, because, like you said, we would have changed it by now. And but the good news is we can make a wave with our desires, and collectively, there's so many of us that want to make an impact, and I think that that's going to change. I really do. So going to your adults now, and you're working with adults now, and what would you say, like, what is the technique that you like to use with your adults to help them? Because you said we all have an inner 9-year-old with us. So how do we, like, if we're going to be in a circle with you, or, what are your top things that you like to do with your adults and their inner 9-year-olds?
Well, I love using creative, all the tools that I use with the kids. So a lot of drawing, a lot of journaling, a lot of storytelling, and then bringing the photo of your 9-year-old child and being able to look into that kid's eyes and tell it you love it over and over again. And that's very, have you heard of Louise Hay, from,
Hmm.
yeah, the godmother of affirmations and
Yes.
mirror work. And like, she was my gateway into the self-help world. Like, Hay House was how I started it all out. And yeah, I look up to her because I think she had the right idea. So yeah, so I would, and people find that hard, Jill. That's hard, to look into that kid's eyes if that kid's been forgotten or buried deep in the psyche or not been seen, may carry a lot of pain. But that child is also the gateway to your creativity, your joy, and your intuition. And in order for you to live like a full, like, become the author of your own life as an HSP, you need to be able to access all of that.
Could you say that again, what you just said about the child is our what? I just think
Is
everyone
our
needs to
gate
hear that
It's the
again.
gateway. Our inner child is the gateway to our pain, but she's also, or he is also, the gateway to our joy, our creativity, and our intuition. And to live a full life as an
Yes.
HSP, to play up to all our strengths, be connected to the child within you. It sounds
Mm.
cheesy, but it's just so true.
I'm right there with you. I've done my own, like, inner child work too, and I know there's different terms for it these days, like inner child,
Yeah.
inner healing. There's so many terms, and I know, like, even back in the day, like when Louise Hay was really pretty popular, that was a term that I think was floated around a lot, and it was kind of a turnoff for some people. Like you said, it's difficult to look at, so then people are like, oh, and that would just be dismissed as something, random or silly, but it really is deeply healing. So what have you found with your adults when you do this kind of work?
There's a lot of crying when they first connect. And my inner child is just over there on the sideboard, and there's a photo of her, and I've got like crystals and cards around her, and I go and talk to her a lot. So I'll say to her like, "How are you doing? You know, like how is it?" And you just notice people. I think people that run with it to start off with get so far with it, and then there's a block, and then they become resistant to it because there's grief there usually, that there's some kind of big emotions that are stuck. But actually, if you think about it, if you don't acknowledge and express and release those stuck feelings, you're still humping them around with you every day. And that's really exhausting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the tools that you mentioned journaling. And
Yeah.
as we're talking about becoming the author of your HSP life, like how does somebody do that?
So with the journaling, I use something which I've called intuitive journaling because it has led me back to my intuition. And I journal with oracle cards. So I've got my story cards with me here today.
Mm.
They're just beautiful. They're all painted by an artist called Kathy Nichols. But I've got loads of decks. Because I feel like the cards are the language of your intuition. So they're symbols and colors and visuals, and that very much speaks to the unconscious or the shadow or the inner child, whatever intuition, whatever you want to call it. And I sort of mix that up with what I call free fall journaling. So free fall journaling is like your morning pages. So I don't know if people know about Julia Cameron's work, which is morning pages, where she says get up every day and literally dump the contents of your brain for 3 pages on the page. And it's almost like a pond with like loads of twigs and mud on the top. And once you've cleared that out, then underneath are the crystal clear waters. And that's where your higher self, your intuition, your wise owl, your inner child, whatever you want to call it, lives. And that's where all the wisdom is. That's where all the good stuff is. So I teach people this technique. It's dead easy. And people are so shocked because they're like, how can a pen and paper solve my problem? Because my problem's really intricate and there's this happen and that happen. It's like, that just seems too easy. And it's like, you kind of have to overcome the belief that it's too easy and just fall into it, and then it will surprise you.
Hmm. Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is like, just try it and see what happens. Be brave.
Yeah. And if people do try it, I'd love to hear like what their experiences of, because like it's so weird how you can have one card so I take a monthly class, and you hold one card up and you might not even ask a question. You might just say, just riff on that and see what comes through. And every single person will have an answer to what they are looking for, but all just from one card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, powerful stuff when we can really tap in. And like you said, clearing out that clutter, so to speak, of the surface stuff in our mind. And then we can really get into that higher self connection is really a beautiful thing. I've done a lot of writing type work too with a writing coach, and it's phenomenal what comes out of that. So this is like really healing. So what would you say are some of the blocks when people are journaling that come up? Like what do they encounter?
The perfectionism is one. Like, am I doing it right? And that's
Mm.
probably one thing I would say to people when I'm bringing them into the class. I'll say, you can't do it wrong. It's your journal. You don't have to write neatly. It's not school. You're not going to be graded on it. There's no wrong way to do it. Just literally let your pen move across, keep moving across the pages and don't stop, because when we stop, we're editing ourselves. And I learned a technique I think it was in a Gestalt therapy writing course, where they said, if you get stuck, you must just keep writing the last word that you wrote. So if you
Mm.
say, I don't know what to write, write, and then eventually your brain will drop into a different place and will give you a different thought to write.
Interesting technique there. I like that. Very curious.
Yeah.
So with the perfectionism, I can see how that would be, and people might be thinking, well, I'm not even an author, I'm not even a writer.
Yeah.
I don't like my handwriting, or, I can see how that might stop somebody. I'm curious. So a lot of people are talking about over the years, I've heard, handwriting versus typing. Is there any difference to that you've noticed?
I personally prefer the pen and the paper, but I think as a kid, because I wasn't always allowed to speak up at home, I was always writing poems and writing letters to people. Whereas nowadays, I suppose we'd send texts and emails. For some people, it does work. And I have clients who've got learning difficulties and they don't like writing and typing. So I say to them, ramble, open up a voice note in your phone and just
Mm.
talk into it, because it's all kind of channeling. When it's higher self, it's all coming through you. So actually, whether you speak it out or you write it out, like, I think we need to not get caught up in doing it right or wrong,
I
and
agree.
just kind of, and it's trusting, and that is the creative process, isn't it? Trusting and letting go, and that's
Mhm.
part of the healing too, and it's hard.
Yeah, and not limiting it either. So that's what I'm hearing you say. Like, don't limit where it's going to come, because what if something beautiful could come out of typing versus writing, especially if we are going to be judging ourselves, like my handwriting is so bad. And if I'm just typing and it's all uniform and looks fine, I might be a little less judgy, and that's not going to block me from a flow. I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. And also, don't judge it. Like you say, be curious. There's no bad writing. Like, you might write a couple of bad paragraphs, because remember, you're going to be writing for like nearly 10 minutes when you get into the higher self stuff. And like, you might have a couple of bad paragraphs, then all of a sudden in there you'll have 2 lines of absolute gold, and bang, there's your answer. And then you go, oh, I don't need to write anymore. That's it. I'm done for today.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I'm curious about the journaling for highly sensitive people. Like, how is it powerful for them specifically?
Because we're great self-reflectors, and that sort of depth of processing that we have, it enables us to go to that space, into that rich inner world, which, I suppose it depends what sort of people we've got around us, but that connection to ourselves is so important. And it does land different when you see it on the page in front of you, as opposed to it rattling around in here. You get clarity, you get release, and you get awareness. But I also think it's going back to that creativity. Like, all HSPs have got creative and intuitive gifts, and this is a way to access those. And all it is just meeting yourself on a different level. That is all it is. And then when you meet yourself in that space, then you can step into your own power, can't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have an example of someone that you've worked with or that you know of that's done this kind of work and they've had like a highly sensitive person that has, had some quite a transformation in doing this?
I do. I ran a 30-day intuitive journaling challenge last summer, and I had a group of 10 women, and they all came out of it with phenomenal results. Like, they couldn't, like, some of them had never journaled before, some of them had, some of them didn't consider themselves to be writers, and one of them said, I haven't got a creative bone in my body. But then I just think that's school, because it knocks it out of you, and I think everyone is creative. We make babies, like, we're born to
Yeah.
create. So, but no, there was one lady who was reaching retirement age, and she was scared of getting old, because like giving up your job and then making that transition in life is a big deal. And I'm probably not feeling like she had a purpose. And by the end of it, she was like, I'm so excited about the future. I can't wait to, get started on the next stage of my life. And I had another lady who actually started to use the journaling as a way of resolving conflict in her relationship with her other half, because it just became so natural, because there's something very freeing, isn't there, about just being able to say how you feel. And that's really important in relationships. But I think sometimes, depending on where, again, back to the inner child, if you had a parent who didn't let you have a voice, or told you how you felt, was very controlling, then there's a freedom in that. And yeah, just lovely.
Ah, that's awesome. Well, it sounds really powerful. I mean, for anyone even, but especially for highly sensitive people, because like you said, we have this real creative part of us, this real reflective part of us, and it's very healing for us to do that. And it also sounds like, I know Dr. Tracy Cooper was talking in one of our interviews that those who are highly sensitive and you've been through trauma, you're more apt to receive the healing of the whatever the modality is that you're going for. Well, he didn't quite say it like that. I'm totally paraphrasing, but he said like they're like we were talking about veterans specifically, that they're going to be more receptive to highly sensitive veterans are going to be more receptive to like therapies and treatments than a non HSP. So I apply that here too. Like dealing with trauma and you're going to try another modality, like why wouldn't I would think that it would apply here too. So my point is journaling sounds like a really good avenue to try if someone's drawn to it to take out what's in your head. And you don't even have to show it to anyone, right? It's not like you have to share it if you don't want to, right?
No, I didn't know that about HSPs and non-HPs
Oh,
being more open to healing. That fascinates me, because I've always felt, or I've seen in my work in family systems, it's normally the sensitive one that ends up seeking therapy first because they're holding all the pain and then they literally can't hold anymore. They need to go and get help. But that that's really fascinating to know that. Oh,
Yeah.
that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
That's good to know that. Yeah.
Well, and I
Yeah.
need to dive into it a little bit more too, because I'm a little bit more curious about like, well, is it because, like you said, they're holding on to it so much and they're at their end? Or is it because I mean, I don't know, I could theorize like as to the reasons why,
Yeah.
but I mean, I know I started looking for help early on, and it's curious to me because then there were other kids who probably weren't even feeling anything, and what they wouldn't be looking because they weren't feeling anything. So it's just a curious thing. So yeah, definitely a deeper discussion
Yeah.
warranted there about that. So I'm curious, you have a free gift for our audience. Would you like to talk about it?
I do. I'm really excited to share with them. I have a class called Journaling Your Jammies. We used to meet up once a month in our jammies
I
because,
just love
when
that.
you have to put your inside clothes on when you've been outside because they've got all the energy of outside on them, and I just put my PJs on, and that's nice and cozy. And we'd light a candle, put some music on, and this is a recording of a class which is teaching this intuitive journaling technique because I really would love everyone to experience it. And I want as many people as possible to see how easy it is, but also how powerful it is, and how much clarity it will give them. And yeah, so I'm gonna show you. It's a 1 hour class, and it's great for people who are creatives that maybe have some blocks around their creativity as well. Um, but it just really puts you back in touch with yourself and your inner world, and you can kind of leave the day at the door and just, it's probably, people would say it's a form of mindfulness. But when, again, just quickly to say, when I was healing from trauma, when I first came to therapy, there was no way that I could close my eyes and sit with myself. People kept telling me to meditate, and it would make me angry because I was like, I can't. And then I felt like I was getting it wrong and I was failing again. But I could pick up a pen and write. And I do think that's probably one of the reasons why I love doing this so much, because I mean, I can meditate now, but I just couldn't at the beginning. So, like, it's easy. Please believe me, it's easy.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a pretty common thing too with people who have a lot going on in their mind, like that rich inner world, like you say. I think it is difficult for people who are starting meditation to find it easy. They find it difficult or challenging, and that's a really good way to get going, is to, like you said, clear the mind, and doing this journaling sounds like it does get you to that place of maybe a more neutral space where then you can just relax and you're not being like bombarded inside.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also helps you connect to the lost and frozen parts of you. So, going back to the inner child work, we've had things that have happened to us in our lives where we've had to disconnect from parts of ourselves or cut off from parts of ourselves. And you'd be so surprised when I'm journaling and I can see this voice coming through again. I think, oh, here comes my stroppy teenager. She's right here with me now. And there's lots of anger coming out. And then it's like, good, get it out, girl. Come on, get it out, get it out.
Oh, that's right. Are you able to hear me okay? Because it seems like it's cutting out just a bit.
Oh no, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hold on. Okay, so we just had a little blip there. And Lisa, do you want to just repeat what you were saying about that teenager coming into view?
Oh yeah, sure. So we I find that the journaling really helps if you have got lost or frozen parts of yourself. So when you've got trauma fragments your sense of self. And so by journaling, you'll notice that different voices come in and you'll get to know those voices. So often I can see the voice of my inner teen coming in because she's mad. She's so angry. And I just say, come on, get it out. That's it. Get it all out. Tell me how angry you are.
So you encourage her to be there and be present and feel what she feels.
Absolutely, because it was always shut down. It was always shut down. So it's like, yeah, you've got to get it out, get it out.
Oh, that's awesome. So where can the audience best find you if they want to connect or ask you some questions?
So I'm on Instagram. I'm Lisa Wildheart, and I'm also on YouTube. If you Google Lisa Wildheart, and my website is smileyforlife.com. That's from my days of being a kids coach. So yeah, I'm Smiley
I
for
love
Life.
it. Smiley for life. And I meant to ask you too, since we're here, Wild Hearts, where did that come from?
I created that label for the kids because I think all of the statementing that happens in the schools is purely so that they can get a treatment plan and get the support they need. But it comes with really negative connotations. They're seen as disruptive, they're seen as problem kids. And I would say to them, you know what, you're a wild heart because you've got big feelings, you've got a big heart, but then there's certain things, that you feel passionately about, and there's nothing wrong with what you're doing. It's just, you're not in the right environment that's supporting you. Yeah.
I love it. And what a neat thing to do, especially for the kids, so they're not labeled with something, like you said, a negative connotation. And we can take that now because, we've got that inner 9-year-old, 8-year-old, 7-year-old, whoever's in there, right? And so we have wild hearts within us, don't we?
Absolutely. And I wrote a book for Wild Hearts. It's called Stuck Between Two Worlds. And it is the story of a 10-year-old little girl who's highly sensitive, growing up in an emotionally cut off family that's got shed loads of generational trauma that's unhealed. And it's how she navigates that. And she has like a fairy godmother that takes her off into the wilderness where she meets her wild heart friends and learns that there are other people like her in the world and that she's not doing it all wrong.
Oh, I love it. That is such a neat story. I want to read this book. Like, I think we talked about it before. It's just such a sweet story. So, Lisa, do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom for our highly sensitive audience before we go?
I just want to say to them, because I didn't for so long, embrace your sensitivity. It's not a label, it's only a part of who you are, and get to know yourself through that lens, and just love yourself fiercely because you're great.
I love it. Love yourself fiercely. Yes. Amen to that. Amen to that. Lisa, it's been an absolute pleasure to connect with you and have you here on this summit, spreading the message that I think all highly sensitive people need to hear. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jill.